Welcome back. I've got Barry LaBov on the line. Barry, how are you?
I am great, Michael. I'm ready to go.
Awesome. Really looking forward to this conversation. You've got a book out. You do some amazing work in marketing, but for those that aren't familiar with your work, why don't you share a little bit about you and then we'll jump into this conversation.
Sure. I'm the president and founder of LaBov Marketing Communications and Training. And for the last 40 plus years, we've worked with small companies and very large companies, including Macallan Scotch, Audi, Harley Davidson, many, many others that you have heard of, and some very, very wonderful smaller companies that maybe you haven't heard of. We focus on one word, and that is differentiation. We wrote the book on it. The book is called The Power of Differentiation. And that's what we're all about. We focus on identifying what makes a brand or a solopreneur unique, and then magnifying it, making it exciting, and celebrating it with the people behind that product or brand. That's what we're all about.
Yeah, congratulations on four
Thank you.
decades of this
Yeah.
work, and you've seen a bit, to
Mhm.
say the least. We
Yeah.
all kinds of economic ups and downs,
Yeah.
changes in governments across the globe, businesses and how they do business, innovation, tech, you name it. I think back, 40 years ago, what the world looked like and what it looks like now, just from
Yeah.
a work or branding. There's so many different channels now than used to. Used to it was print and television. Now it's the web and smartphones and everything else, and easier access to everything. Which means that sometimes your message might get lost in all of it, unless you're different. And
Right.
I mean, going back to, the Apple ad, think different, and all of that. It was just, just one of those things, and I love that your organization has been based on that because
Yeah.
that's, pardon the pun, the difference.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, you're just going to be in the river of everything else. And if someone
Mhm.
happens to glance down and they see your logo go by in the river, great. But otherwise, you're just going to be in everything else. It's like you need to stand out. You need to, have people that are your ideal customer find you. And how do they do that? And, that's again, the game has changed a little bit, but my hunch, and correct me if I'm wrong, my hunch is even though the game has changed, it hasn't. So I'd love to hear your
Right.
thoughts on what you see is different than when you first launched your organization to now, and some things that are just, quite frankly, tried and true and quote, basically won't ever change.
I think what's happened from a technology standpoint, even before AI, even before websites, even before cell phones, what's happened digitally is that it is far easier today to do a mediocre job than it used to be. It used to take a long time to do any project, any job, whether you were a musician, took a long time to play in beat on that song, right? Okay, well, today you can be very sloppy in music, and all you have to do is just press a button and it fixes all those beats you missed. Well, it's the same thing in art. It's the same thing now in technology all over the world. It's very easy and quick to do mediocre work, which means more than ever, we have to stand out and be human. So, where do we look at today versus the past and say, well, nothing's changed there? Here's where nothing's changed. And that is if you're trying to be like everybody else and price like everybody else, you're going to lose because you're going to commoditize what you do. And this is important for the audience, okay? It's not just your product will deteriorate, and it's not just that your profits, if you have any, will dissipate, but the motivation of your employees, your team, could be your dealerships, all of that will vaporize because now you're not that special anymore. Now they don't feel significant that they are offering what you are producing. So it's really important. And one thing I'll share, Michael, is differentiation. It sounds like, oh my gosh, how do I figure what makes me so unique? I'm not the best at everything. You don't have to confuse superiority with differentiation. Doesn't mean you're superior. Certainly not going to be superior in every area. It means you're doing something in a specific, distinct way for a reason which you need to explain. And that's why you're doing it. And that's why your customers are being attracted to you. That's why they think, well, I'm kind of interested in what you're doing. That's what we have to identify. So the great news is we do not want to create a brand new brand for our companies. It's too much work. What we want to do is discover what we do best and really honor and celebrate it.
And that it reminds me of a conversation. I've shared this on a show a few times. I was working with a nonprofit healthcare organization, and the board of directors were all community-led members. They weren't necessarily clinicians or physicians or anything like that, but they all had, of course, really important ideas and things that they were passionate about individually on what the organization should be. But unfortunately, when you have a dozen of those people, you have a dozen different visions of what the
Yeah.
organization can be. And I'm not dismissing any of them. But finally, after a couple board meetings of this kind of going around things, one of the board members, Enzo, was he was in banking. So he was the business guy. And,
Yes.
he was pretty straight laced and just, would want to know the financials, all that, and was kind of quiet. Finally, he stood up, and as you know, in many board meetings, everybody's sitting down. He stood up and he goes,
Hmm.
"People, who are we?"
Right.
And it was one of those things where they went around the room, and as I mentioned, it was 12 different versions of that organization. He said,
That's right.
"There's your problem. We don't have that. What are we doing to differentiate us from the clinic down the street?" Because there's a clinic literally down the street.
Yeah.
What are we doing differently to entice potential patients to choose us instead of them? And they did great work down the street, but so do we. But
Right.
what do we do different? What do we offer that they aren't currently, or what are we offering that is a different experience? And and for many entrepreneurs, and we know the stats that over 52% of online businesses that were launched in 2020 are gone now,
Hmm.
which isn't a surprise. Startups historically don't do well, but a lot of it is so many of them short term were addressing a need, but
Hmm.
they weren't thinking post pandemic. They weren't thinking, okay, I get to this, what's next? And you look at organizations that have been different over the years that are been around a long time, you can trace back, okay, that's when they pivoted to this. This is when they did
Hmm.
that. The ones that stuck to what they do, more or less, they're not around. So
Right.
that's what's
Hmm.
so important about, being different and, taking that pause. And a lot of organizations, moving at the lightest speed, we can't pause. It's like sometimes you have to literally pull off to the side of the road and look
Right.
and go, who are we?
Right.
Are we still who we are? Because, even with my own organization, it's taken all kinds of twists and turns over its existence because I take those pauses and going, okay, am I still doing the same work that I did 8 years ago, or is it different? What are the needs? And well, actually, the first question is, what are the needs that I see? Let's validate that. Let's make sure that that's actually the needs that are out there for the people and organizations that I serve. Is that true? Because I want to
Right.
say, okay, here, I make this fancy peanut butter and they have a peanut allergy. They're not going to buy it. Okay.
Right.
So it's important for us to recognize, what is the need out there? How can we address it? And too often organizations are so focused on what they're doing, they don't look up and go, hey, well, what's actually going on out there?
Right.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think you're right on target. I think we have to understand that, as Simon Sinek said, what's your why? That's important. But then let's go deeper and let's describe what we do that supports our why. So it makes sense, right? And it has to do with explaining it first internally. Because if we have an army of believers who are working with us, we're going to be more likely to succeed. Because you mentioned startups failing. The statistic I've heard is that 16 out of 17 companies will fail by their 10th anniversary. So what that means is we're competing against 16 other companies that don't know how to price and are promising crazy stuff. So we have to be able to be strong and say, well, okay, I know other people say this and that, and I know they promise, okay, but this is what we do, and this is why we think it is valuable. So I think there's a lot of that involved in it too, Michael.
Yeah, it's really important, and thank you for sharing that stat of 16 out of 17. It's not easy, but again, it's what you did yesterday may not work today. I mean, you got to have systems in place and understand things, but expecting to do the same type of result you did in years 1 through 3, especially the way this world is evolving and
Mm.
needs and all of that, it's you got to update the playbook, update that manual, standard operating procedures. Entrepreneurs, work on those if you could, please, because I know so many of you, when I ask you, what's some of your procedures and how you do things, it's just because you can spell the word ad hoc doesn't mean you should run your business that way. Just a side note. So let's segue over to your book.
Mhm.
And I ask authors this all the time. Okay, what motivated you to give up such a huge chunk of your life to write a book? Because it is a time-consuming, passionate love affair, quite frankly, for everybody that I've ever talked to that's written a book. But what was the motivating factor for you, especially, over your long career? I mean, obviously you've got stories upon stories and
Mhm.
experiences and everything else. But what was the drive for you to say, what, we need to put this in a tactile format for people to be able to consume?
Well, I've been in business for 40 years and I've met some amazing people. And I've been part of uh, many companies succeeding, not because of my company or me, I won't say that, but I've been part of it. I've been able to watch. And I thought it would be great to share the good stories and identify those great people behind them, and then share some failure stories, but not identifying any of the people, of course, so that people can learn, people can identify and say, wait a minute, here's what's interesting about this book. I actually learned that I don't have to be something that I'm not. I can actually focus on what my company really is. Okay. So I thought that was very important because I believe if you do that, and I believe, by the way, any company that's been in business for more than 10 minutes has a differentiation. You got to have something. So as I was writing this, Michael, a big thing happened, and it was COVID. And I believe it was in 2021 during COVID, over 50 million, 50 million people quit their jobs in the United States alone. Just walked off the job, they're done. Okay. At that moment, the book changed because I thought, I'm trying to identify differentiation so that clients can grow their business, right? And I thought, wait a minute, there's another audience here, and that is the person who is working for that company, the employee, the associate, the coworker. They need to believe. And if they don't think the company they're working at has differentiation, they're going to be one of those 50 million walking off the job. And if not, if they don't walk off the job, they're going to be one of those many, many millions who don't care about their job and are not going to do a great quality job. Because why should they? I wouldn't do a great quality job if I didn't believe what I was doing. I mean, who cares, right? So the book has a very, very powerful subtitle, which is Win, W-I-N, Win Hearts, Minds, and Market Share. And that's the order of the magic that this book is about. The power of differentiation is how to win the hearts of your people, win their minds so they go, wait a minute, yeah, it feels good, but boy, is this really something that can help people? And then you know what? You're going to get your market share. That's what it's all about. It's filled with really interesting stories. It's not my autobiography in the least. And it also has a lot of actionable information, like how to do a jam session, how to really create great ideas, the power of words. There are 200,000 words in the English language. And how often do we describe our product or brand by the same 6 or 7, service, value, quality, integrity? Okay, nobody hears those words anymore. So come up with unique words that fit your brand. That's why, as an example, the power of words with my company is we focus on one word, differentiation. And we have a process. And that process has 5 steps, and nobody in the world does one of those steps. Now, other people in the world do 3 of those steps, but nobody does. There's a particular step. All right, well, that's where we're unique. Same thing applies for all who read the book. It gives you a roadmap on how to discover something you're already doing, showing it the attention and love that it deserves.
I love that. And as you're talking, I was thinking of, just like in this room, I've got ring lights on and all of
Uh-huh.
that. And if I change the direction of the lights, how
Mhm.
I appear will change. One, you'll see even more reflection off of my hair or lack thereof.
Uh-huh.
Also, just, the lighting in the room, the dynamics change. And that exercise and there's a ton of them in your book,
Mhm.
can help organizations. They're thinking, okay, how to do a complete retool of my service. Not
Mm-mm.
necessarily. It's
Yeah.
tweaking this and there, and I love the fact that you recognized in 2021. A lot of the work that I do is workplace culture, burnout recovery, and prevention, and whatnot. And I noticed 21 was, those numbers of people leaving were astronomical, and it was panic across the board.
Yeah.
One, you got the people that are leaving. They're like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know what I'm not. And I think that
Mm.
was important for them. Sometimes going out without a safety net, that's not for the meek, for sure. The organizations were going, oh, now what? And it's interesting to see how the pendulum swings around back and forth. Like right now, we're seeing a lot of tug of war between the return to office mentality, and
Mhm.
people ask me on that all the time. What's my opinion on that? It's first ask your customers what they need. Don't forget
Mhm.
to ask them. Ask them first. What do they need?
Mhm.
Can you provide that differentiation of service if you're remote or in person or a mix thereof?
Right.
It's not a black and white answer for many organizations. Some, yeah, it makes sense. Others, not so much. But it's like everybody, we want that instant gratification. Should we stay or go? It's like
Right.
you're asking a question that is a lot deeper, and that's where the organizations that are doing well are having those conversations and getting input and getting the understanding. At least if the organization says we want to return to work, but they open it up to their employees and they say, okay, what's your thoughts on this? Okay, what are some of the challenges, the pros, the cons, and all that? If they have an open dialogue, even if they said, okay, we are deciding that we are returning to work 5 days a week, the
Mhm.
people that aren't up for that, they can leave, but hopefully they feel at least I was heard and they considered it. And they were, as articulate as they possibly could be from an organizational standpoint. And communication properly is marketing, folks. That's you're marketing your own company to your employees. A lot of people think marketing, they're thinking external facing. No, 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 no. It goes
Right.
inside too. It's really important to recognize because everybody's a stakeholder, whether they're paying you or you're paying them. You need to make sure that all the pieces are working as harmonious as they can. But I'm really pleased again that you took that, the book, and went, ooh, wait a minute. And again, that's you paying attention to what's going on in the world, going, okay, well,
Right.
the book is great. This is going to make it stronger and address the needs of what we're facing even here in 2025. Those same needs are there, and of course
Oh,
we've
yeah.
seen new ones as well. But no, it's so. I always ask authors this too. It's kind of like asking, okay, who's your favorite kid? Never answer
Mhm.
that question. Don't admit you
Right.
have one. But is there a section in the book or something in your book that really resonates with you, that you're proud how it landed and how it resonates with people that are reading the book?
There's a chapter that talks about the names that we call ourselves in our businesses. Some people call themselves a best kept secret. as an example. And we have a chapter in there that talks about, should you really call yourself a best kept secret? Is that something to brag about? Should you call yourself just another blah, blah, blah company? Somebody says, what do you do? Well, we're just another. Should you call yourself a local? Well, what do you do? Well, we're a local. Okay. And it's the words that we call ourselves, the way we address ourselves that demean us. So all the leaders, it's my favorite part of the book, all the leaders that read that need to understand that if you get up in front of your people and you say, look, we're just another, okay, you're telling people that what they're doing is not that special. We're just another, manufacturing company. We're just another car manufacturer, truck builder. Yeah, we're just another. And you can't run a business and you can't work at a business and have pride and use that kind of terminology. So to me, you got to look at how you talk about yourself to anybody.
And that's so critically important. And I thought of organization that, I'm working with, and they've kind of gone through that, and
Yeah.
they're trying to differentiate. And I'm actually going to give the owner, I'm going to pick up a copy of the book and give it to him. It's like, Felix, read this.
Yeah.
But he does a decent job. I'm not knocking it,
Uh-huh.
but there was some things that were said in a team meeting that I overheard. I wasn't in the meeting, but I was in the next room over, and I could hear a couple things they were saying. And they kind of said that, we're
Yeah.
just, like, ooh,
Yeah.
yeah, just
You-
if you want to say just in case, or if you're starting to say the word justice, which again, that could be a whole,
Yeah.
justice is different for everybody. But it's, don't, again,
Yeah.
and I think back of, a comment or a quote that is attributed to Bruce Lee about never diminish yourself, although I made a joke about my bald head. Was
Sure.
not meant to diminish, but thinking about that, it's like,
Yeah.
it could be construed or viewed by someone saying, okay, he's, kind of diminishing himself by making a comment about the
Yeah.
fact that I save a ton of money on shampoo every year. So it's just one of those things where you catch yourself. And entrepreneurs and business owners and managers and leaders, if you haven't picked up on this by now, you should. It's like, this is nothing in life, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending how you look at it, is set in stone,
Right.
or you set it and forget it. It's an ongoing thing, just like breathing.
Hmm.
Inhale, exhale, eating, drinking water, and things that are good for you, getting rest. You don't do it just once, like, okay, yeah, I slept on that one day in 1976. I'm good, it's like, no one, not everybody's Gary V. You sleep once and then you're good for the rest of your life. No,
Right.
you have to do things, and in business, it's the same thing. You have to identify yourself and be bold to say, look, we are the best at this.
Right.
Even and if you don't think that, then you got to ask yourself, okay, why don't I think that? Okay,
Right.
we'll figure out where you got to be.
Well, I think one thing I'll add for the audience is, uh, one time I was doing a presentation and one of my employees said, we're a local blah, da, 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 da to the client. And so when we got done, I talked to the guy and I said, now, you said we're a local whatever. He goes, well, yeah. I said, well, we're working with companies all over the world. And to position us that way is inaccurate. And he goes, well, I don't want to brag. And I said, here's what's really important. The truth is the truth. It's not bragging. Okay. So if he got up and said, hey, we're the very best in the world, and nobody's as great as us, maybe that's bragging, right? But if he says, we work all over the world, we are providing these services, and we have a process that no one else has because it focuses on blank and blank. Well, that's not bragging. That's telling the truth. A best kept secret RV company that I worked with, they bragged about being a best kept secret. I said, if after a year we're still working together and I'm still helping you, if you still call yourself that, then I will resign because it's not who you are. And he said, well, we're Amish. We don't like to brag. And I said, it's not bragging. You can share what you're doing and why you're doing it and let people decide if they value it. Now, if you say, hey, I'm the very best and nobody's as cool and great as me, that's, worthless. But I really urge our audience to look at who you really are. Don't worry about this bragging thing. Get rid of words like we're the best and we're this and that. You don't have to go there. But what you can do is share what you're doing that is unique, period. And if the client values it, awesome. And if they don't, that's great too. It means they're not a good fit.
Yeah, that's a very important lesson for us to wrap on. So, Barry, love this conversation. Where can people find out more about you, grab the book, and everything else?
Michael, I love to connect with people. So I'm on LinkedIn, Barry LaBov. Easy to find. I'll respond to you. My website, barrylabov.com, has some of my music, some information on me. You can connect with me there. My company's website, LaBov, LABOV.com. Same thing, reach out. And go to Amazon if you can. Buy the book and leave a review. It's important for the algorithm at Amazon. I appreciate that. Those are different ways, but I'm happy to help anybody. I'm not looking for business out there. What I'm trying to do is inspire over 1 million people with this message.
Yeah, it's very important. I'll definitely have that information in the show notes. And it's important too to get that message out because when businesses are better, they make better products and services, and you and I and everybody else benefits from that. So, Barry, loved our time today. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Michael, excellent. Thank you so much.